apologize for the delay. It is 7:15. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 19th, 2021 Board of Trustees regular meeting. It is 7:13, and I'm going to call the meeting to order. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have Lisa Hall with us this evening. I need a resolution, or I'm sorry, I need a motion to approve her to take the minutes to tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Support.
Second.
I'm sorry, I think Megan was there first. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. When you're ready, would you please take the roll call?
Bartholomew,
Here?
Edwards,
Here.
Fowler,
Yes.
Hart,
Here.
Justin, Parker, excuse me,
Here.
Poznanski,
Here.
Melzan,
Here.
all members are present.
Thank you. We have a quorum. All right. At this time on your agenda, you have the consent agenda, which normally would contain the bills. It also has the minutes from March 15th. As you note, on the green sheet, there are no bills for this board packet due to the extenuating circumstances. It also includes tonight's agenda.
Okay. I have just a couple things with the minutes. So do you want to remove it from there, or can we discuss that?
We should remove it if you want to talk about it. So
Okay.
we'll move
Just a
it.
couple small corrections on the minutes.
Okay. Do we also want to remove the agenda, or are we good with the agenda?
We probably should remove it.
Okay. So let's remove both from the consent agenda.
And does the bills fall under this then also?
The bills are not included in the packet because you have nothing to vote on for this evening.
Okay.
So it's not included in the consent agenda, just the items in the parentheses. Okay. So let's go first with the regular minutes.
The things that I saw just with the consent agenda, there was no motion or vote. There should be a motion and vote, I think. I think it was unanimous, but I don't know, but it's just missing.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a
And-
motion by Bob with support by Edwards.
And then
Okay.
the other thing, with the motion that was for the posting of the minutes and the draft in 3 locations, it was also to be on the village website. And it shows about the 3 locations, but it was also to be put on the village website. So just add that. That's item D,
Yep, okay.
motion. That's the 2 things I had.
On the draft minutes, I don't know, it's maybe petty, but is there any way when we get our copy, we can get the draft thing taken off? Kind of distracting when reading. We could just post it on the ones we get in our packet.
Yes, again, with the lack of ability to access the IT, these weren't available, so we
Okay.
utilized the ones
All
that
right, so
were
this
hanging
was-
in the window.
all right.
Yes, so
I didn't
that
know
would
if this
not
was
be a
gonna
normal
continue
course.
this way or not.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Was there any other corrections, additions, or deletions to the minutes? All right, motion to approve the minutes with the corrections mentioned by Mr. Hart.
I'll make the motion.
Support.
Okay, so we have a motion by Hart, we have support by Bartholomew. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And then the agenda?
Yeah, I believe when we went through appointments, I think, didn't we have an appointment that we had to do this month with the planning that was opening up?
No, I do not have,
We had
I don't have.
Did you do, Matt? Did we do?
No, for the planning.
That was
commission.
last month.
They already-
Right.
she already
We have one
did.
member that has a term that's expiring, but I am not prepared at this time to make that appointment or recommendation,
Oh,
so
so we're
it's not on
going
the
to leave the seat
agenda.
open?
Right.
Okay.
Didn't we
Yep.
reappoint him, or?
No, that's
That
the
was-
president, we're talking the planning commission.
No. No.
Yeah, yeah, we had one coming up.
What is that seat?
Oh, I was talking about President Pro Tem.
What's that?
Who is up
That
right
was
now?
done last month.
You all set?
Yeah.
No. I think it was Grandstaff seat, correct? It was
Right,
coming
his
up.
term is expiring.
Expiring this
Mhm.
month.
But he still gets to sit even though it's expiring until we fill it, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay.
Support.
Second.
Oh, we have a motion by Hart, we have support by Edwards. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Who submitted this agenda? There's no name at the bottom of submission?
I believe that I created this agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, number 4, we have special presentations. This evening, we have none, so we will move on to correspondence. As listed, there were 3 correspondents that I wanted to make mention. The MSU Extension, Terry Gibbs. I have heard back from her, and the gypsy moth spray came in less, $5 per acre than what was estimated, so that amount will be $140 an acre. So a small savings, but a savings based on everybody's participation. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention.
But neither Bruce nor Washington approved to do the spray either, did they?
I believe Bruce Township did, but Washington
Bruce
Township
but
did not.
Washington didn't, okay.
Correct. Bruce did not? Okay.
It's not, that's what I heard.
Okay. I did confirm with Terry Gibbs that neither location within those 2 townships are adjacent directly to us. So it's not like it just extends over Gates or extends over on Durham Street, but, okay, I was not aware of Bruce Township's final decision. In your packet, you received copies of the DDA TIF plan survey and the master plan survey. I included the responses that we received by both, and I wanted to just make mention during this meeting that both of those surveys are up until the end of April. If you have not had an opportunity to take either one of those, we are actively seeking input from our residents on the Downtown Development Authority's public survey for their TIF plan extension. And the master plan that the Planning Commission is actively working on with our village planner, Steve Casson. Both of those surveys are on our website, I believe, and on our social media page. So if you haven't had an opportunity to take it, we would love to have your input. We've got, so far, I believe, 122 responses on the master plan survey and 31 responses that were reported about 2 weeks ago at the DDA meeting. So great that everybody's engaged and plugged in, so take a minute.
I briefly brought it up at the DDA meeting also, but I haven't done the DDA survey yet, but the master plan survey, I know there's some flaws in it. I don't know if there's any way, before we continue to get more input, get those corrected. I mean, some say check all that apply, and you can only check one. So we're kind of narrowing down what we're looking for, if that's the survey we've got out there.
I took it and I didn't encounter that.
It's the very first question.
But maybe I didn't read it and I just checked the one.
Is that the
If
master
they give you
plan
the
one?
option to check all that
survey,
apply.
yeah, and there's nothing limiting if you take it 100 times.
And are we inputting non-residents into our survey? 'Cause
Any member of the public can take it. You don't have to register your address, correct? So anybody can take it
Yes, I
that's
know
seeing
we
it.
have at least 25% non-residents.
But I believe, to your point, that it does track IP addresses, so it is just one per computer. I thought that's what, at least the DDA
The
TIF
DDA,
plan survey
yes.
was.
The
I don't know
master
about the
plan
master
is
plan one.
completely different.
So if you wanted to draft an email with, whatever items that you've noted that are not working properly, I'm happy to pass it along to the
Yeah, just so we
the
get
person
some
that created
correct
it.
information, that'd be,
Yeah,
I think,
he can
important.
probably update it, sure. Okay, so that's it for correspondence. We have public comment on our agenda. Is there anybody from the audience that wants to make a comment at this time? Please come up to the podium.
Will anyone have an opportunity throughout to discuss anything that's on the agenda?
If they ask for an opportunity to speak onto that agenda item,
Would they have to do that now?
yes,
or-
that would be the appropriate
Okay.
time
I
to do
just-
that
I
now,
know
per
there's a
our
couple
rules.
ordinances in place that,
Right, per our rules of procedure, yep.
so-
Mr. Parker?
I think I'd like to make some comments about the so-called rental item coming up under unfinished business.
Okay, I've noted that. Anybody else? Mr. Tuck?
Well, also the parking discussion that comes up,
That is not on our agenda for this evening?
it's not.
It is not. The payment in lieu of, is that you're speaking of, it is not on our agenda for this evening.
And I may defer to Mr. Parker for the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
You guys can arm wrestle over that later. Was there anybody else? All right, hearing none, let's move on to our officer reports. My president's report for April 19th, 2021. As a reminder, our second joint Bruce Township and Romeo Paper Shred Day, we have added an electronics recycling day. It's coming up on Saturday, May 1st. It's from 9 to noon. This is a different change of location. We'll be hosting it here in the parking lot at 361 Morton Street. It's free to any resident or business within Village of Romeo or Bruce Township. There is a limit to the amount of boxes you can bring. I believe it's 6 banker boxes, although the last time we really never did fill the truck, so people who came and dropped off 6 said, hey, can I bring back more? And we certainly made that accommodation. Electronics recycling is new this year. There are some items that they will not take, but for the most part, you can feel free to call that company that's going to do that work. They do not destroy those electronics. They recycle those pieces. So, if you're going to bring an old computer, make sure that you understand that the hard drive is not being destroyed. It would be up to you if you wanted to remove that and destroy it on your own. But the actual box or whatever the computer looks like, you can certainly bring that. Old TVs, there's some limits to they're not accepting the old tube TVs, but pretty much anything else. You got, calculators and any other electronic that you have in your household and old computer monitor screens, they'll be happy to take those and you can drop them off on next Saturday. I'm sorry, 2 Saturdays. The Romeo Tree Board is planning an Arbor Day event on Friday, April 30th. This will be our first Arbor Day event in a very long time. I was unable to locate it in the records when we actually had an Arbor Day event, but we are actively, the tree board is working very hard, and we're hoping to become a designated Tree City USA. And part of the requirements for that designation is that we have an official Arbor Day event. So they are planning an Arbor Day event for Friday, April 30th, which is Arbor Day. 3 of our local residents and 1 local business will be sponsoring the plantings. As of right now, 2 trees will be planted at 195 South Main. That's the home of Anna and the late Paul Reese, who's in memorial to Paul, who was our former village president. 2 additional trees will be planted at the Tri-County Bank location just next door to that property at 205 South Main. 1 will be in memorial to Leon Bourgeois. That's the father of a resident, Ken Bourgeois. The location is subject to change. We're waiting for confirmation from the road commission if we can actually plant them where we hope to plant them. But for right now, we're planning that location. Our guest speaker for the event, among others, will be Gerald Santoro from Green Macomb program. Many people have maybe noted the opportunity to buy planting materials at a wholesale price through that Green Macomb program. So it's a nice opportunity. He's very well-spoken on the efforts to make our county as green as possible. So come and hear what he has to say. There's also a limited number of free ponderosa pine seedlings, about 100 for attendees to take home. I don't know if anybody remembers. I do, getting them when I was in elementary school, the little Ziploc baggie that had the little sapling in it, and everybody planted it, and Dad probably ran it over with the lawnmower. But they'll be available to take home and plant. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing pandemic, in guidance with the Macomb Department of Health and Human Safety, their recommendations were limited to 300 people. But there's going to be complete live coverage of the event and additional education programming provided by the MIT TV for everybody to enjoy. So stay tuned for that. That's a very exciting opportunity. A member of our village staff, unfortunately, has tested positive for the coronavirus. As a result, we had to temporarily close our office last week to the public. We put cleaning protocols in place and took measures to continue to protect the safety of our staff and visitors to the village offices. We were able to reopen the facility this morning. So we anticipate being back open regular business hours to serve your needs. In response to the recent cyber ransomware attack, I posted to our social media page last Thursday and publicly made a similar statement at the special village council meeting that was held last Wednesday. This official statement is what I read. The village offices recently learned that cyber criminals have deployed ransomware to our network. This ransomware infection required us to shut down parts of our network as we work to remediate the issue. As a result, some of our IT assets may not be fully available, such as online bill payments, although we are quickly remedying that, and I believe that asset came back online, if not today, tomorrow, for online bill payments. This criminal investigation and remediation process is fluid and ongoing as our team of cybersecurity experts work to recover access to our equipment. At this time, there is no indication that any employee or resident's personal information that we maintain have been compromised. Myself and our team take this situation very seriously and are taking all precautions to mitigate potential harm. Under advice of both special and general legal counsel, with agreement from our chief of police, in an effort to protect the Village of Romeo from further attacks and our abilities for a successful resolution, that is all the information I can provide you at this time. I encourage all of our residents to be vigilant against the many threat actors which always seem to be active throughout the course of our everyday lives. We probably all know someone who has been a victim of a hacker, someone who's able to manipulate emails, send infected virus links through various methods. We seem to be bombarded with phishing schemes and robo-phone calls from threat actors who misrepresent themselves in an attempt to scam anyone who is not vigilant against these attacks. While, as I just stated, we have no indication at this time that any information that the village maintains has been deleted or compromised. We encourage everyone to be on guard for attacks against their personal information. Our police department is always available to assist anyone who thinks they may be a victim of such an attack, or to simply call and ask them about the validity of a request prior to engaging with the entity. If you have further questions about the incident or its potential impact, please call or email me at the village offices. I'll do my best to reply in a timely manner. That concludes my president's report for this evening. I do not believe we have a clerk's report to read tonight. Do we have a report from our treasurer?
I just want to reassure the village residents that there are strict bank controls and the accounts are monitored on a daily basis. With online payments, through the Village of Romeo website, you do have the option for online payments for the water bills. You would go into underneath the section where it says pay water bill, and it'll take you through directly right through point and pay. So the format's going to be a little bit different, but if any one of you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or send me an email and I can walk you through that whole process. Next week, I'm going to be out of the office, and that's a Zoom training, which is through the Michigan Treasurers Association. It was a scholarship that I was awarded 2 years ago, and then with the COVID, it's been delayed. But I will have access to my email and be following up with any questions or concerns next Monday through Thursday. Also, I'm excited to make the announcement that I did hire a part-time treasurer's assistant, and her first day of employment will be May 3rd, and I spoke to her earlier this afternoon, and she is looking forward to coming in and working. And her name is Caroline Miller, and she lives in the village. And if any of the board members have any questions, that would complete my treasurer's report.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustees. I don't know who I normally start. Zach,
Okay.
do you have a trustee report?
Well, yeah, it's after our meeting last week, the emergency meeting, to Clerk Trapp and to Chief Dan. No, I did not receive any filtered or inside information from any of our village law enforcement personnel regarding your questioning me. Regarding Trustee Hart's domestic violence issues. I did receive information from Trustee Parker, who foiled the information from the village. So that's where I got my information from, was Trustee Parker. Okay.
Trustee Parker?
Yeah, I wasn't planning on, but Yeah, so yeah, I did FOIA information as a concerned resident and also a father, husband in this community. I felt it was kind of my obligation to FOIA that information to see how I needed to better protect my family from someone that has a history of violence. And so yeah, and if you had a question, come to me, because that was definitely me that FOIA'd that information. I mean, I live around the corner, you know, I see things, I hear things, and if you got a question, come to me next time.
Well, I wasn't questioning you. I was questioning some information that you didn't have, was out in the open, and I was trying to figure out where it came from, because it appears that it might have came from my office.
I never received any information from any of the law enforcement.
Well, yeah, that's my job, I gotta find the stuff out.
All right, trustee report. Anything else, Justin, for a trustee report?
I just want, on your Arbor Day, you talked about a couple trees. Don't we also have a tree going in with, is it through the DDA?
Yeah, it couldn't get in time.
Right.
Okay.
The timing, it just isn't working out, right? Carl Brand is in charge of the
Yeah.
project with Ron White, I think, is the one who's gonna plant
Yeah.
it in a planter, but he wasn't
Okay.
able to coordinate that, so it won't be part of the Arbor Day on the 30th. But
Okay.
I believe that's still happening. It's just not part of
Yeah,
that day
Ted Street,
event.
okay. I just wanted to
It's happening, we need to purchase a planter.
purchase a what?
A planter. The person assisting us doesn't want to put it in the ground, they want to put it in a planter, so we need to buy a planter.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be interested in donating, so please.
Yeah, we
keep
have
me
to have
informed on that.
donations because the DDA cannot purchase this. So if anyone would like to donate for the planter, don't see me.
Great, thank you.
Trustee
Okay.
report?
Nothing at this time, thanks.
Trustee report?
Nothing at this time.
Trustee Polzanski, trustee report?
I do, I have a couple things. I have finally completed and received my certificate in the zoning administration, so I am well versed in a lot of zoning things and things that I had never, blueprints and all of this sort of thing. So yay, that's over. Next on my docket would be, I'm trying to achieve my Master Citizen Planner certificate. I have taken the exam and passed that exam. Right now, I'm working on my presentation. That is the next step, is I have to do a 20-minute presentation. I plan to give this to the Planning Commission at some time. It has to be before December, so at some point I will try to achieve that as my next step. And I wanted to put out, the DDA is having an event, it's called Chalk the Walk. It's involving sidewalk chalk. It will be all weekends in May. Sidewalk chalk will be provided downtown in front of all the businesses for free. There will be prizes for different age groups. There ends up being 4 different prize categories each weekend. So please participate in this fun, free, COVID-friendly event. We will have Stephanie Feltzak, who assisted in the mural that we have downtown. There's a couple days that she's gonna come and do chalk so we can see our actual artist, a professional person out there, a Saturday and a Sunday, so there is that.
That would be much different than the smiley face that I could draw. So we'll look forward to the professionals that showing how to do it.
I just found out that the Lions Club is doing an event. It's called Mayfest, and they're having food trucks and such, and I can't remember off the top of my head the date for this, but I just randomly...
May 22nd.
Okay, I randomly
Yeah.
saw that today, May 22nd, $5 entry, and the doors open at 12 p.m.
12, yes.
Anything else you want to add?
Not really, but yes, I
Okay.
guess.
Okay.
We have 3 bands. There's a car raffle that'll all be put out. They're selling tickets to win a car. There'll be 3 bands. There'll be some involvement from local breweries. Blake's is going to be involved, and like you said, there's going to be some food trucks and some different vendors and things of that nature.
And then the DIA Inside Out program is coming back to us. So that's kind of what the art and the chalk is leading up to, is more art.
That's
So
cool.
we are just full of fun this spring.
Yes. And we have the new gallery that opened up in the Masonic Temple. They're opening a second location on the corner of Lafayette Street and Main Street. So we'll have 2 beautiful galleries. The both locations will carry different artwork, so Yeah, it's very exciting in conjunction with what Starkweather does for us. Trustee Bartholomew, any report at this time?
Nothing until sidewalk committee.
Okay. Ex officio planning commission?
I didn't make the last meeting, but I was checking with our recorder over there. She said basically nothing happened. Or I also checked with Jim to see if he could attend tonight's meeting. So, no, nothing to report.
Okay. Let's move on then to committee reports. We have the sidewalk subcommittee. We had a meeting scheduled, and unfortunately we had to cancel it due to a timing issue. But did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Just that, and thank you, Justin, for meeting with me today to go over some sidewalks that some of the residents were in question of. There might be, I'll go over it with our contractor, Jeff Rapp. I'm meeting with him tomorrow morning, and it was nothing major, just a couple, maybe the forms, nothing major. One thing that made the sidewalks look kind of funny, because somebody had mentioned that when you look down, it looked kind of like where the new sidewalks were, they were like wider. But that's just because the neighbors who didn't have them, have theirs replaced, they don't, a lot of people don't edge their sidewalks. So when you look down, it looks like the ones that we put in are bigger. So it does look different from, it'd be different if they were replacing the whole thing. But when it comes to piecework like this, it doesn't always look perfect. But I think overall they're doing a good job. And like I said, I'll be meeting with them tomorrow to address any issues.
Good.
Like
I have gotten a few phone calls from some of the residents who already had sidewalks marked, inquiring about that start date, and I said that we were waiting for that information. So as soon as we can get that, I appreciate you relaying that on to me.
Absolutely.
Where's our focus this year?
I beg your pardon?
Where's the focus for this year?
We're going to be starting on, well, we want to get the across from the high school done, but the sidewalks that are marked are on Dickinson, I beg your pardon, on Bailey and Dickinson, because we want to make sure that the kids have safe sidewalks, so we're starting there, because that's kind of the entrance to the Amanda Morse School. But they are marked, and I think he's ready to move forward. It's just.
There are a few others that were marked in some other locations, one particular on Washington Street that I'm aware of that was originally marked the very first year that we didn't do. So I'm doing an accounting right now of the letters and engagement notifications back that were done in conjunction with the scope of work to make sure any others that got missed, that they get put top of the priority list
Yes.
for Jeff to start this season before we work on West St. Clair. Megan, that was going to be the targeted area, because I think East St. Clair is pretty good with the sidewalk, but the road commission replaced that with that work heading eastbound. But West St. Clair certainly is, there's a lot of trip hazards there, so.
Now, did
I
we
know we
reach
briefed,
out?
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. Did we reach out to the funeral home and the church? They're all they're aware of everything?
I did. I didn't
Okay.
reach out to the church, but I reached out to the funeral home, and
Okay.
he's actually happy, because
Good.
a lot of people that walk up to funerals in the winter, they have to just jump into the street to
Yes.
finish their walk. So he's real happy about that.
Good.
I did have a meeting with Mike McDonald from HRC. I asked him to do a site visit, and he's taking an inventory and giving a calculated cost on what it would take to actually connect that sidewalk. They're the one that, pretty much mapped out all of our other sidewalks. So hopefully I'll have a report back for you next month or at the budget meeting workshop, because I think that's one of the things we're budgeting for.
I was going to ask the exact same thing. I know we talked about the funeral, and I was just going to follow up with the
Okay.
church, but yeah.
Okay, that concludes our committee reports. Then let's move on to unfinished business. In your packet, you have a copy of the rental inspection ordinance. I asked Mark to please redraft this in ordinance format so that I know we've revisited and talked about this at previous meetings. We had some discussion about a possible exemption. Mr. Fowler had asked for a family exemption to be built into it, and I told him that I would engage in that possibility, talk to our building inspector, Mike Bomarito, as well as planner Steve Casson, and we met, I believe Mr. Clark was also at that meeting because he was going to draft some possible language for inclusion in there. When we talked about enforcing and actually organizing a program such as this, there is no consistent way to enforce or monitor family exceptions. It's impossible. Zach, you talked at length about family and longtime residents and you know, that personally, you know, you felt like everybody would do the right thing, because we have residents who continually do the right thing,
Well,
right?
it's not an
Just
income
because they
producer.
have it, just because they have it rented out to a family member.
Yeah, it's not an income
But,
producer. I mean, that's one thing
right,
why.
it was recommended by Mr. Bomarito that we do not include that exemption in this ordinance, so therefore it's not drafted inside there. I also received a phone call from one of the planning commission members who reiterated that the planning commission voted 8-1 to not have the exemption put in the ordinance. That Zach was the dissenting vote on that, so it was their recommendation that it be approved and presented as the original draft was. So,
The planning commission wanted it to come to council. If that's your decision, then that's your decision.
correct,
So what has changed since we last saw this document?
nothing.
so
Nothing
that-
really changed. We changed the
So-
format so that it would be in the right ordinance. We didn't add, or, I mean, I shouldn't say that, not that nothing changed. Mark included references to the building codes, because that's our point of reference. We enforce those. We verified with our building inspector, Mike Bomarito, that he doesn't go, you can't enforce retrofitting stuff. So if stuff is built in the, 1910, he's not going in looking to have all that updated, to your question.
Yeah,
What
I think that
happens
should
with
be
that?
clarified in here, though, because it's clearly not. I mean, it makes it sound like you're gonna enforce,
It's part of the building
Current
code,
code.
correct, Mark? Yes.
Well, it's not part of the single state construction code. It's a code that the village has adopted by reference, the property maintenance code. It is published, I could probably tell you, by a national organization. State law allows local municipalities to adopt certain codes by reference, and that is one of them. And the village has previously adopted the property maintenance code by reference, and that is the code to which reference is made in this proposed
the
ordinance.
international property, is that the one we're speaking of?
I believe so.
Okay.
So I'd like to make a motion that we move forward with adopting this new rental inspection ordinance.
Well,
Okay. We have just a couple more questions, so if
Okay.
you would just hold your motion, it's noted. Well, we adopt them as they become published, so the most current one is what we would adhere to. They change them from time to time, and we're notified of that change by our building inspector. We bring it to council and ask them by reference to adopt as the updated code that we're going by in the village.
The International Property Maintenance Code gets updated yearly.
Right.
You would have to yearly.
Correct. We have done that as a practice, yep.
Is it yearly?
Yeah.
I thought it was yearly as well, but maybe,
I found the 2020.
Honestly, it was biannual.
I found 19, I found the 17, I didn't find the 18. I couldn't find, I only found one free, otherwise you're gonna pay $25 to $50 just to look at a copy, period. If you're adopting the code.
I know we have a reference copy in the office that we utilize. I do not believe that they are free for the residents to take. But certainly if you had questions regarding it or wanted to look at it, I know we have one there. You'd have to defer to Cindy Wilson, who would have that document.
I did skim read the thing's got around 100 pages.
Right.
And it addresses things like where you live, you would be subject to it because you're an owner occupant, and it specifically comments about owner occupants being part of the rental inspection. Have you ever adopted a cost for this, or how did you intend on doing it, or?
Well, I'm going to ask council to assign a fee to it. Council, again, regularly adopts permit fees, a structure of fees for all of the services that we offer, for inspections, a roof permit, whatever those fees are. So council would need to also, if they choose to adopt this ordinance, assess or assign a fee. I believe my recommendation, when we get to that point, will be $150. That's for a 3-year time period. So it covers 3 years.
So you're gonna have Apple Valley have all 100 and some units inspected every 3 years, or the trailer park, or the apartment buildings, or like you say, I own some buildings downtown which have an apartment in them, and Greg, I know, has a couple, 3 or 4.
Mhm.
So each of us is going to be paying per unit, or?
It would be per parcel ID, and it would be for a 3-year time period, unless there is a PRE, principal residence exemption, that is applied to that parcel.
The code specifically says an owner occupant is going to be, is subject to it. So you'd have to adopt what Zach was suggesting for PRE to amend. In
Mhm.
adopting of this, that code does not allow you to not be inspected. It specifically says you will be inspected because you're an owner occupant.
Right. I believe we built that in here, though,
I
did
didn't
we
see
not?
it.
A principal residence exemption, I know we talked about it at the meeting.
I didn't see
We
it
also
in there.
talked about the opportunity for,
When I asked if anything changed, you said nothing.
for multifamily.
So I'm going to guess that it didn't get put in.
More clarification, I mean, it's titled at the top residential rental properties, and then we get into definition, and it talks about commercial, industrial, and everything else. Is this just residential, and then do we need to change that definition for this ordinance? Or is it encompass every rental within the village?
It would be rental properties where a principal residence exemption is not filed, or a multiple quick claim deed, because that was the recommendation from Mr. Bomarito, that if a family member lived there through whatever contract or not a contract, to simply add that name would allow them to be exempt from this.
So this is only for residentially zoned properties, or?
I mean, the title says residential rental.
Mhm.
or in
But are we
case of
including
downtown
everything?
area, You've got commercial structures which have residential residences in them.
Right, it would be rentals, residential rentals. Yes,
Residential.
But you're not-
residential rentals, right? It's not renting to a business, right?
For instance.
So it's not Ray Schaefer renting out 1,500 square foot of
There's a
No.
warehouse?
commercial
This
building
is-
that's at the
Situations you
Lions
aren't
Club,
collecting
and
rent.
somebody lives there.
So
That,
they're just making the house payment. But you're still classifying these as rentals, they're not rentals. And that was the problem I was having with this issue. So,
Mark, can you point out in here where the principal occupancy
That code
exemption
you're
is?
talking about specifically addresses the fact you may have what you are describing, but that it will be covered by it, okay? I mean, I'm telling you, the code that you're talking about, at least what I read, they talk about quote, unquote, owner-occupied units, period.
Yeah.
So in the case of Madam President, she lives in an owner-occupied residential, commercial unit, whatever. It would be applying to her, accepting the fact that she would file a principal residential exemption. If she didn't file that, then she has to pay the fee. And since I assume she's filing a PRE, I don't know my business. Okay?
Yes,
So if someone's like got a Lady Bird deed, and they're still claiming the PRE, or they've made some other arrangements that they're filing the PRE, they're not covered. If they don't file that PRE, then yeah, it's covered.
it's a rental property, right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes, but, you know, you have situations to where homes are left to
I
an
know.
estate situation, but it's still in the family.
Right, I understand that,
And
and they're covered.
and you can't put one specific person's name on that deed. It's still,
If they don't have a PRE, then they're covered. That's what she's saying.
I want to make sure that's correct, Mark.
Because, yeah, I didn't see that.
If you look at the definition of rental unit,
Mhm.
it talks about any dwelling unit or unit containing sleeping quarters, so it could be in an industrial building, not the building itself. If they're doing machine tooling, no, they're not gonna be subject to this ordinance. They might be subject to other inspections, but not this. And it says, which are leased or rented by the owner or other person in control to any tenant. So if the property is being rented, then it's gonna be subject to this. If it's owner occupied, and to Mr. Parker's point, you would,
Which
there
one?
are ways of, Mr. Bill Parker,
Thank
there
you.
are ways of knowing that, but if it's owner occupied, if you filed a principal resident exemption, then, not by definition, but that's a strong indication that you're not a tenant. So, the PRE, the principal resident exemption, is not stated in the ordinance, but by application of the definitions, you have to determine who's an owner or other person in control and who's a tenant. And if there's a tenant, then you're gonna be subject to the ordinance, the way it's written. Now, you haven't adopted this, you can change it, revise it, you can reject it, you can do whatever you want with it, but as it's presently constituted, it applies to tenant occupied locations, whether they're strictly residential, a 3-bedroom home on Croswell, or whether somebody's renting, maybe they shouldn't be, but a room out in one of the buildings in the industrial area.
How do you classify your renting tenants? I mean, as long as you're receiving money from that facility, then that's a rent, correct?
Well, it says leased or rented by the owner or other person, and,
Some of this verbiage needs to change.
well, again, I'm not making a policy statement, I'm telling you what the language says and how it would be applied. So if you want it to accommodate certain situations that aren't addressed, then this is the appropriate time to do it.
But if they're renting a room in the industrial park, it doesn't even apply to this, because this is for residential.
It says industrial property.
For living purposes, right? Under dwelling unit, it's for living purposes, having cooking facilities, sanitary facilities, including single-family residence. So I guess if they're living in the back storage room with a kitchen, that would apply, right? If they're renting
I
a
understand what
unit
you're
to.
saying, but does that then,
Change
what
the
is the
title.
residential rental properties?
Well, because the residential part of it is the living space, it's not the non-living space.
Someone resides there.
Okay.
But again, this is if you're considering adopting this is the time to craft it and include the language as you want it to be, because somebody in the village, the building inspector, a code enforcement officer, somebody is gonna have to apply this ordinance, and so you want it to be applied in the manner you intend by adopting it.
The code that you're referencing is utterly, totally specific, that you can have, quote, owner occupied units, and that they're subject to the same inspection. It says that, I mean, all you gotta do is, this thing is incredibly boring and incredibly long. And I would beg anybody here who's read it, has anybody here read it? I mean, we're talking about adopting a pretty draconian, at least in my view.
We reference it, but I must say I've not read it from cover to cover,
It
no.
might, before you decide to adopt this thing, it might behoove you all to
I think we
sit
should have
down
a
and
copy.
spend a day reading it.
Yeah.
You're going to spend the better part of a day reading it. It is basically a restatement of the,
But we defer to the expertise of our building inspector, who has read it cover to cover. He is the one that goes in and does this work, and we rely on his expertise. We pay him for his expertise
Mike
to
has
understand.
never come and inspected a single
What?
residential, new, old unit in the 45 years I've been.
We don't have we don't have the program in place. He has no means by which to do that. That's what this is doing. This adoption of this ordinance creates this program so that we have the ability to go in and make sure that we have safe living conditions to cut down on blight problems that we have in the village for non-homeowner occupied residences. We don't want
If we're looking
another
at blight,
Gray
though,
Garden
that's separate.
situation like we have up on Chandler Street, that, you know, where those tenants were in there and no one had the authority or the wherewithal to go in and go, this is unsafe. and, you know, the building, and make the mandates happen. We want to make sure that our residents, whether they rent here or, you know, they live here, are as safe as possible. And we know that there's some blight. This was a suggestion for which to address that.
In my view, you're looking at an answer and searching for a question. They're really, somebody owned a piece of property and they let it go to hell. You could see it happening year after year after year. But, and you're saying that you'll stop this from ever happening again by being fairly intrusive to people living in rental units.
Well, the attempt, again, is to make sure that we have a mechanism in place, which is the ordinance, and we have a professional inspector that we pay to do this work. And it is our goal to cut down on the blight and the poor living conditions that we know exist in some of our residential areas.
I feel this is way too broad of what we're asking. I think it needs to be narrowed down and specified on what we're looking for.
What would you like it to say, then?
We talked about it at the last
We
meeting,
talked about
and
it
none
at
of
the
the
last
changes were
meeting.
made.
You wanted to know what we were referencing because it didn't have the property maintenance code, which Mark included in there.
Yeah.
That was one.
And that
Zach
wasn't
asked for-
included for us to review. If you
Yeah,
want us to
it-
adopt an ordinance that
It
encompasses
is included
that,
in here.
The wording, but the code is not. How am I gonna vote on something to encompass a code that I haven't seen?
The code isn't going to be printed in entirety to this. The village adopts the code by reference. We don't print it. We don't write it. We adopt it by reference as a tool for our inspector to use as as a rule of thumb that he applies to whether it's new, whether it's rental, whether, you know, there's property
I
maintenance
can
codes.
respect that, but you're
Yes.
asking me to vote on something that's going to enforce that,
Right.
and
You-
I haven't been provided that. How am I gonna vote on that?
You can ask for to see a copy of it. You can go into the village office to see a copy of it. I believe you know where the copy of it is.
Is it the most recent code?
It is the most recent code. We just adopted it.
No, I mean, is the
Oh.
copy you have available, is it the 2021?
I would have to check on that. I do not know. With the fact that it's 2021, I do not know. The last copy that Mike brought in and said you need to adopt this by reference, that was the one that we did, but I would have to check the date on it.
Yeah, I don't know where the International Property Maintenance Code is. I don't use that in my business. So if that's what you're referencing, no, I don't have that. It also talks about requirements and talks about the ordinance providing a registration form, and that's not included. Just in this for us to review to vote on.
I don't know why you would need to see the
If I'm voting on a complete ordinance, I'd want to see the complete
Well,
ordinance.
But
the application, the registration form has nothing to do with the ordinance. It
Those
just
things
says
can
that
I mean,
there
there's,
will be
there's
one.
other, there's other things we can go through that I think need to be corrected, or we can sit down later and go over that instead of holding everything up here, but
Yeah, we
there's some
mentioned
stuff
at the
that talks
last one.
about, under registration, B3, residence address. Is that the residence address that's living there, or is it the owner, or is it the property address? There's things that need to be clarified. Same thing with 6, there's some discrepancies. Talks about having authorized people to work on the property listed on a registration. So anytime a new contractor comes in to work on a house, does that have to be updated? Do they have to be on that as an approved contractor for that residence? There's just a lot of things that I think need to be looked at before we even attempt to vote on this.
So then would you like to form a subcommittee to do that, or how would you like to proceed?
Yeah, I wish Mike was here and we could talk to him also, but if a subcommittee would save time tonight, then yeah, definitely.
Of course it would, so.
Yeah,
Okay, we can form a subcommittee to do that and meet with Mike and go over it.
I'd appreciate
Okay,
that.
are you volunteering to be that subcommittee member?
I will be in that
Okay.
subcommittee. Can
Okay.
we include business owners or rental owners in with that? I mean, they're the ones that are gonna be
I think the
subject to this,
subcommittees,
so I would
I
like
think
some
the
input.
subcommittees are limited to council members, but you could certainly bring in consultants if you
Thank
wish
you,
to
yeah.
invite them to give you
Yeah.
some reference.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a do we need a motion? I think we need a motion to form a subcommittee. So I'll make a motion to form a subcommittee for the purposes of reviewing the rental inspection.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion by Malzahn, we have support by Parker, and then names. Oh, I'm sorry, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so then on this subcommittee, Parker, you volunteered. Fowler will volunteer.
Can we ask Mr. Parker
Not to be on
to
the
sit in
committee.
as a consultant?
You can ask him, the committee can ask him.
Yeah, the subcommittee.
You can invite him.
Right,
But he's not on the committee.
Understandable.
okay. Anybody else that wanted to be part of this committee? Okay, committee of two. Let me know when the meetings are.
We can include Bob Marito, not on the committee, or is he as a
He's-
consultant?
Again, he would be a consultant.
Okay, well,
So
that's-
when you schedule the meeting, or if you pick a date and you notify me, I'll, extend the invitation and do my best to coordinate that with whoever else,
All
or,
right.
well, I would
think
assume that
that's
you would
a perfect
contact
way to
Mr.
handle
Parker,
this
but,
tonight. Thank you.
yeah.
Table it for now?
Yes, we'll table it pending the subcommittee's recommendations. Okay, so next, we have new business. Local state of emergency declaration allowing for remote meetings due to COVID. So, I apologize that this was late in coming to you. I emailed it over, but there's two parts to it. There is the actual declaration of the Romeo Village state of emergency, which I will read through, which is declaration of the Romeo Village President declaring a state of emergency in the Village of Romeo to combat the novel coronavirus and for the purpose of permitting the Romeo Village Council and other public bodies of the Village of Romeo to meet by electronic and telephonic means. Whereas the Director of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services has concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic continues to constitute an epidemic in Michigan, and that control of the epidemic requires restrictions on public gatherings, and whereas the COVID-19 pandemic continues to constitute an emergency in the Village of Romeo, and whereas the Michigan General Law Village Act, Public Act 3 of 1895 as amended, specifically MCL 64.1 and MCL 64.2 provide the village president is the chief executive officer of the village and conservative of the peace. And whereas under the Michigan General Law Village Act, Public Act 3 of 1895 as amended, MCL 61.1, specifically the MCL 64.1 and the MCL 64.2, the president of the village is authorized to declare a local state of emergency in cases of emergency or disaster, which the COVID-19 pandemic is. Now, therefore, under the powers provided by the Michigan General Law Village Act, Public Act 3 of 1895, as amended, the MCL 61.1, I, Christine Malzahn, President of the Village of Romeo, based on the findings made by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services regarding the public health threat posed by the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and its variant strains, and the conditions now existing in the Village of Romeo, hereby declare a state of emergency in the Village of Romeo to combat the COVID-19 novel coronavirus and to permit the Romeo Village Council and all other public bodies of the Village of Romeo to continue to meet by electronic and telephonic means as provided in Public Act 254 of the Michigan Public Acts of 2020, after March 30th of 2021, and respectfully request the Romeo Village Council affirm this action through July 31st, 2021, by the adoption of an appropriate resolution. Then before you, you have the resolution that Mark drafted. The resolution permitting meetings of the Romeo Village Council and other public bodies in the Village of Romeo to be held in whole or in part electronically by telephonic or video conferencing, and readopting and extending rules for remote audience by Romeo Village Council members and members of other Village of Romeo public bodies and members of the public at meetings due to the COVID-19 pandemic, and the declaration of an emergency by the Romeo Village President. Whereas on April 20th, 2020, the Romeo Village Council adopted a resolution establishing rules for remote attendance by Romeo Village Council members and other village public bodies and members of the public at meetings due to the COVID-19 pandemic, as then allowed by executive orders issued by Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and the Open Meetings Act. And whereas the director of the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services has concluded that the COVID-19 pandemic continues to constitute an epidemic in the state of Michigan, as evidenced by and described in the emergency order under MCL 333.2253, gatherings and face mask order issued by the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Director Elizabeth Hertel on April 16, 2021. And whereas the Michigan Opens Meetings Act, Public Act 267 of the Michigan Public Acts of 1976, as amended by Public Act 254 of the Michigan Public Acts of 2020, permits a meeting of a public body to be held in whole or in part electronically by telephonic or video conferencing due to a local state of emergency until December 31st, 2021. As long as the requirements stated in the Open Meetings Act, as amended, are met by the public body. And whereas Romeo Village President Christine Malzahn has declared a state of emergency in the Village of Romeo on April 19, 2021, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, thereby permitting meetings of the Romeo Village Council and meetings of other Village of Romeo public bodies to be held in whole or in part electronically by telephonic or video conferencing. Now therefore be it resolved that the Romeo Village Council immediately authorizes its members and members of all other public bodies in the Village of Romeo, along with members of the public, to attend all meetings of public bodies electronically by telephonic or video conferencing, in whole or in part, provided that any such meeting satisfies the requirements of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Be it further resolved that by the resolution establishing rules for remote attendance by Romeo Village Council members and other village public bodies and members of the public at meetings due to the COVID-19 pandemic, adopted by the Romeo Village Council on April 20th, 2020, containing the requirements for the notice of meetings, conduct of meetings, and attendance by members of the public for meetings of public bodies conducted electronically by telephonic or video conferencing, in whole or in part, is readopted, and the terms therein are included herein by this reference. Be it further resolved, this resolution shall be effective immediately upon its adoption and shall remain in effect until July 31st, 2021, unless earlier modified or rescinded by the Romeo Village Council. So, under the Open Meetings Act and the rules that Governor Whitmer put in place allowing for exemptions to the Open Meetings Act, allowing us to have met through Zoom or other public members of other public bodies of this village, that expired. And so the only way as of right now to allow that remote meetings to happen is to declare a local state of emergency, which I have done, and for us to adopt the resolution thereof. It is the intention that this is not mandated. It is at the discretion at this point of our chairman of all of the boards. So we don't have to meet remotely, but if the virus continues to spread, like we know that it has, a body, the chairman of a board until July 31st can choose to meet remotely to ensure the safety of its members and the public that may attend. So that's the intent behind this and why lawyers get paid so much.
You want a motion first or discussion?
Whichever you would prefer.
Okay, just a couple things that pop up. One, if we go back to what was put into place for the meeting and the conduct in April of 2020, does that not then reverse what we already put in place earlier this year for our rules of procedure?
The rules of procedure, I believe, were for the conduct of how we will act in the remote meetings. Doesn't dictate whether we will meet remotely.
I mean, because it directly says conduct of the meetings, right? In that. So-
Right, which we adopted. It doesn't change that.
But if we go back to April 2020, April 20th, 2020,
That's a question for Mark.
The reason for the reference, and I can do this differently if you would like, the reason for the reference to what you did on April 20th of 2020, I was trying to not reinvent the wheel, but still be clear. The resolution that was adopted in April or on April 20th of 2020 contains the requirements to meet remotely. Notice of meetings, conduct of the meetings, attendance by members of the public, and how that's implemented. And so the reference in the current resolution before you is to readopt and include those by reference. But if you prefer to have all those spelled out again in the separate current proposed resolution, that can be done. My premise was you did this once. That doesn't mean, foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. I'm not saying because you did it once, you should do it again. I'm saying if you want to do it again, because you've done it once, I didn't feel the need to reinvent the wheel. I just made reference and allow you, if you choose, by adopting the ordinance, to bootstrap what you had done before. But if you don't want to do it that way, you should not do it that way.
all right, just to simplify it for me, does this put us back to where we were at April 20th of 2020, or does it keep in the current
No, you
conduct
can't.
rules that we adopted in, was that January?
Your rules of procedure, how you conduct your meetings in terms of, can you add things to the agenda, who can speak, and your rules of procedure apply regardless of how you meet. So if you meet all in person, those rules apply. If you meet electronically in whole or in part, or one body does and another doesn't, whatever the rules of procedure governing your meetings remain the same. This just allows you to meet not in person. It doesn't change your rules of procedure.
It just allows, like, the planning commission to say, we want to meet by Zoom,
Yeah, I can
or
respect
we
that.
want to meet in person.
I just know the
And
new
each
stuff that
group-
we updated specifically talks about online meetings. So if we've added that, we should probably make sure that that is how we're gonna follow. Stuff like having to be on video, having to have that communication with people is something we adopted in our new rules of procedures. So if I just wanna make sure that that's included, because there's nothing in there, and I think that's why we added it, that you have to be on video for a Zoom meeting.
Again, the rules of procedure stay the same because what we adopted April 20 of 2020 was to allow us to meet remotely. Not how we were going to act parliamentary, right, during the meeting.
Well, now I'm confused. What you did in 2020 that I thought you wanted to replicate tonight, you could be on the telephone as part of the meeting. You wouldn't have to be seen. But you have to be able to participate, both, and it has to be the ability to communicate in two directions, and just as we can in these physical meetings. So if you have adopted rules of procedure that require appearance on the video, then this isn't going to do that.
So it doesn't include what we just adopted
We
this year.
work both ways, because we had a meeting here before with Zach. We were all in person and Zach was on the phone.
Right,
Yeah,
which
that was
fine.
prior, but with the new procedures, or rules of procedures that we adopted this year, it clearly says we have to be on video and we have to follow, I
Well,
mean,
you can be more severe. You just can't, again, you have to allow for the participation and the interaction. And so if you say, and I don't know that, using Matt's mention of the planning commission, I don't know that the planning commission has the same rules about having to be on video. And if they don't, then they wouldn't have to do that. But if you do, then you have to follow your own rules of procedure, whether you do it remotely or in person.
It was included in the new procedures. So that was the only concern I had when I saw that we were retroing back to 2020.
Then to that, Mark, does that get applied to, is there freedom and leeway in the residents participating? It doesn't, that's just the council rules of order. They could call in on a phone.
Yes, that, you have to be able, if you look at, and maybe I should just take a step back and another running start at this and include the specifics of what you had done before. But if you look at what you did on April the 20th of 2020, there's a very comprehensive approach that has to be taken in terms of communication. People have to be able to see or hear one another. People have to be able to submit questions. People have to be able to respond. That you had done that a year ago, and you don't have to do it again, but if you're going to allow for meeting remotely, as Christine said, first of all, there has to be a local declaration of emergency because at the state level, it ran out on March the 31st. But the Open Meetings Act was amended in late 2020 to allow for remote meetings if you adopt, or if there's a local declaration of emergency, which there is. So now you can choose, if you want, to meet remotely or not.
Can the board still meet in person
Absolutely.
and have remote access for the public, or does the public have to be able to come if
No,
we're meeting in person?
No, they can. You can have it, you can have that mixed setup, if you will, as long as that you allow for everything that the Open Meetings Act requires. Hearing people, seeing people, being able to talk, being able to interact, as long as you follow the Open Meetings Act requirements, you could have, I don't like to use the word, but I will, this hybrid where some of you are here and some of you aren't, including the public. You can do that as long as you follow the proper procedures and satisfy the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. This doesn't compel you to meet remotely, it just allows you to.
To meet remotely.
I guess what is the plan then for next month? Are we planning that on a meeting?
I don't anticipate this board changing unless the COVID virus, affects one or more of us. We had a recent exposure in the village offices, so we ran the risk of not having, the ability to come here or risk the health and safety of the audience. So by that means, it would have been most productive to be able to allow it to be remote. The Planning Commission has some members that may not be comfortable at this point, may not be vaccinated or whatever their situations are, that they would choose to meet remotely. And right now they can't unless we declare I declare a local state of emergency and we adopt this ordinance or resolution that allows for that.
Can we then add this then for review each month moving forward? So if next month things are fine, we can say, okay, I know it says we can, but can we make sure that this is added to?
You can do that.
This goes to July 31st.
Right.
Yeah.
The idea for 3 months is that everybody's schedule is all over the place and may not coincide with our meeting date of which this body would do that. So this just gives us a 3-month window for which us to monitor the vaccine and how it's working in our community and help ease the timing of it. So this is just for a 3-month period. That's my recommendation. Some municipalities have adopted it for the rest of the year, but I was comfortable with 3 months.
And if this board didn't like it in a month, you could get rid of it.
You could rescind it, it says. So,
Can I make a motion to accept this ordinance?
I'll support it.
a resolution. It's a
Resolution?
Yes, okay. Okay, so we have a motion
I'll support it.
by Edwards, we have support by Hart to adopt the resolution as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Let's move on to item new business B, Arbor Day proclamation, something fun. Again, in conjunction with our Arbor Day and the Tree City USA venture that we're working towards, I have to make a formal proclamation for Arbor Day. So, a proclamation by the President of the Village of Romeo, Michigan for Arbor Day. Whereas in 1862, J. Sterling Morton proposed to the Nebraska Board of Agriculture that a special day be set aside for the planting of trees. And whereas this holiday, called Arbor Day, was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska. And whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world. And whereas trees can reduce the erosion of our topsoil by wind and water, cut heating and cooling costs, moderate the temperature, clean the air, produce life-giving oxygen, and provide habitat for wildlife. And whereas trees are a renewable resource, giving us paper, wood for our homes, fuel for our fires, and beauty to our community. And whereas trees in our village increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and provide character to our community. And now therefore, I, Christine Malzahn, President of the Village of Romeo, in the County of Macomb, and on behalf of the Village Council, do hereby proclaim April 30th, 2021 as Arbor Day in the Village of Romeo, and I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and support the efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. Further, I urge all citizens to plant trees in order to promote the well-being of this generation and future generations to come. Dated this 19th day of April 2021.
Do we have to do this every year?
No, I think I just have to do that once. But we
Because we
did
did
do
it-
it last year, and
because we
then
did it
COVID
last
made us
year.
cancel our Arbor Day event, so we had to do it again.
Well, I was just wondering if we had to do it yearly because we have April 30th, 2021, or
2021.
should we just leave it at April 30th?
April
And that
30th.
means
I proclaimed
indefinitely.
that this year, Arbor Day is April 30th.
Gotcha.
It happens to be April 30th this year, but
Yeah.
that's my proclamation, that I'm designated in the Village of Romeo, that that date is Arbor Day.
Awesome.
Okay, you have in your packets tree maintenance approval. You have a list of expenditures from Mount Vernon Tree, citing the locations and the work to be done. There are 2 pages to it. The first one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 7 locations. It's $6,400. The second sheet attached, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 5 locations, $7,765. Last year, we noted that there were some maples, significantly, a lot of these are maples, as you read in the description. Tim is continually sent out to properties that have some concerns over their trees that are in the right-of-way. These are only for trees that are in the right-of-way and the village's responsibility. I asked Mount Vernon Tree to sort of, at their convenience, do a drive-by and identify other trees that may be in need of repair or maintenance. He noted a lot of the maples are dead inside. I think we had one of those on Tilson Street last year that you alerted us to, that you don't even notice until the bark starts coming away, that, one good storm, and then it's gonna crash through somebody's roof. So these are his recommendation, locations, costs associated with that work.
Is this who we are set on using? Or is this like someone that we're contracted with? Or should we not get 3 vendors?
Well, we are not contracted with them, but they have been the preferred provider for a lot of time. And then when we do have an issue that's reported to us, this is typically who we call to go out and give us an estimate.
Gotcha. I mean, I like Mount Vernon. I just think, once again, I'm gonna go back to our policy on, quoting. We should get 3 quotes from 3 vendors.
Well, right. So unfortunately, a lot of these are more time-sensitive because they are hollow. And with the spring weather upon us, we may not have the latitude in the essence of public safety to do that. So if you want to have this work done, we can approve that tonight. If you want us to, send out an RFP, I don't know how that would possibly be
RFP, I'm gonna
worded.
call 2 other tree
For
companies.
contracted services, but,
Call 2 other tree companies and have them do the same thing, or give them a list of addresses and say that we need prices on doing this.
Burden to do so, because anything over 5,000 in expenditures has to have 3 estimates, from what my understanding.
right, well,
Unless it's an
right.
emergency.
Right.
These trees are a safety issue.
Right, no, I don't doubt that,
If
but,
you look at, we can give you the list of trees, but if you want to look at the trees, there's a lot of dead limbs.
oh, I don't dispute, I live in the village, I walk it every day. But what I'm trying to say is, just because I'm the preferred vendor for my one client, doesn't mean that she shouldn't shop me, because I could be getting comfortable soaking that pond when somebody else is gonna give us just as good a deal. I'm a contractor, so I know what you're saying, but there is the way to spend my money the right way.
Right.
Well, and
Because
truthfully,
in essence, it's all of our money. So
Wait.
Meantime, while we're waiting for.
I can call a vendor right now and have 3 guys out here tomorrow.
well,
And then we
I'm
won't be
just
for a
saying, it's
month.
that simple. This does all the work.
Right now,
this is dated from March
Sorry.
22nd, which means that's the day this was submitted. So that's at least a month ago, which means he was informed and had time. So this could have already been done.
Yeah. I mean, we've got the policy in place, and if we're not, I mean, continually, we're not following it. We should just bring that up for review and change it, that if we're not gonna ever follow our
we
policy,
can certainly do that.
we should do that, but right now it's in
We can
place.
certainly do that.
And
Yep.
why the 2
So-
separate quotes again?
It's just 2 separate pages.
Okay, well, because it has different numbers on it. At the top, one's 10,684 and one's 10,683, as if they're different.
It's 2
quotes.
separate quotes.
Right.
One quote, but it's voted on 2 separate.
Okay,
And you have room.
gotcha.
That are monitored.
14,000, yeah.
So you can table it if you want me to get 3 quotes. Again, you run the
I didn't
risk
know if
of
they
one
were
storm blowing down a
divided
tree on
into more
somebody's
important
house because
versus-
you don't want to authorize this expenditure.
Couple more
All right,
quotes to
I'm
follow our
suggesting
policy.
that
No,
we
I just want us to
authorize
follow
Mount
our
Vernon
policy.
tree.
Not that I want a tree to, I mean, if,
Right.
like I said, this was submitted 3/22, there was plenty of time.
Tree board, they should have maybe mentioned this the last time he.
The tree board doesn't dictate or look at maintenance issues.
They don't.
They do not.
Okay, so Mr.
They're
Miller,
volunteers.
Nothing like that, you just,
Yeah.
He,
he's part of a tree board for the gypsy moths.
no, the tree board was involved in the gypsy moth because I asked them for an educational. The tree board looks at the greenscape that we have, the tree line that we have, and to recommend plantings that are in the right of way so that we don't have these hazards. There's no predicting the health of a tree with the root, the sidewalks, the other stuff that's gonna happen. But that's what that board is functioning doing, not necessarily looking at the maintenance. Yep.
I was asking Tim, but we couldn't converse over that I wondered if the 2 pages, if one was the more important ones versus the other, if that was the difference between that there's,
No, I mean, there are a few on there that are more important
which ones would those be?
than the other ones. I have to get with John to see which ones they were.
So we got 12
There's some that
items.
are marked as hollow.
12
Right,
items.
okay.
I would go ahead and just get the 3 quotes and
Yeah.
If you'd like, Christine, if you have something, another option we could do, we could give it not to exceed. We can take this quote, it's 14,165. We can authorize to have it done, but get 2 other quotes and, 2 other local quotes and take the lowest one.
I don't even know if I want to go with the lowest.
Well, there's like, I don't know, budget's a local one, what's
That's already
another?
out of the bag, so.
Yeah, 2 more quotes. Follow our policy.
I make a motion to table this until we have quotes from 2 other vendors.
Okay. I'm sorry, we had a motion, that was a motion by Parker. Did you support that? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll get some more quotes. Okay, you also have in your packet police vehicle equipment purchase approval. This is the equipment that will be going in the new vehicles that were purchased. And so this is money that's, or expenditures that's coming out of forfeiture money. And this has the list of equipment that's needed for those vehicles.
And this is about $9,000, is that correct?
Yes, $3,140 and then $5,570.99.
I understand it's needed, but I thought when we approved the purchase of the vehicles, we were informed that that equipment was going to be able to transfer over.
Most of that equipment ended up breaking, all those lights are garbage now. There's most of those cars, and the councils aren't fitting in to the new cars, so we had to upgrade to them.
I mean, I can respect that, I just wanted to clarify, because I thought
I'm
that's,
retrofitting everything that I can, but, most of it was garbage, you're talking 8 years old.
gotcha.
And a lot of those lights don't even work, so. And like I said, this is all out of forfeiture money, this doesn't cost.
So I can respect, I just wanted to clarify, maybe in future, we can just include this with the purchase.
It's hard to do because you don't know what's gonna need to be replaced, what,
Yeah.
to actually buy them outfitted from forgeries, they've been looking at another $30,000.
Nice.
I'll make a motion to accept the Procom Inc. Bid using the forfeiture funds.
Support?
A roll call, please.
Edwards,
Yes.
Bartholomew,
Yes.
Mr. Fowler,
Yes.
Mr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Parker. Parker?
I don't know, I was gonna ask a question before we start voting, but is this something that's already been done? Has this already been expended? I mean, we can't get other quotes on this?
Well, I did look around, those were the best quotes I could find.
Yeah, yes.
Kuznanski,
Yes.
Malzahn,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, next up in your packet, item E, DPW backhoes repair for the approval. You have the list from Michigan Cat for the repairs needed. This was already done because they needed to use the backhoe. It wasn't operational, so we did the expense. I approved it, bringing it to council so that you understand where we're at.
We need any,
So we don't really need to approve anything here, do we?
is this
Notification.
within your limits to approve?
Well, I mean, I did it on an emergency
Yeah,
basis.
that's what I
So
mean.
I
You
would
still
still
need a
like a
motion?
motion, right. Yeah.
Make a motion to approve the expenditures for Michigan Cat.
So we have a motion by Parker.
You need a total?
Support?
We have support. Okay, we have support by Edwards. I can total it up real fast.
It's under 5,000.
It's under, right, 662, just for the record, we'll go through the homework. 171, I did not add this one up. 123.42, 12 cents. $1.71, 2:018, 152.
Is it working good now?
352, 68,
I saw it rolling down the street.
$2,699.99.
You said 69?
$2,699.99
Sorry.
is what my calculator shows, so.
My
Does your
motion
motion still
stands.
stand? Okay. Roll call, please.
Parker,
Yes.
Edwards,
Yes.
Kuznanski,
Yes.
Bartholomew,
Yes.
Fowler,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Malzahn,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay, last new business item, restated and amended ordinance 556 for the marijuana business. You have a copy in your packet. It is highlighted for convenience of what updates that we wrote into it. So, does anybody have any questions?
I do. And
Sure.
we briefly talked about it, I think, last month or the month before. I know we've still got the scoring, the overall scoring in place. I think very strongly in here, we need to make sure it's noted that that scoring is going to happen at an open meeting. That should not be done.
It has to be done. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. The scoring, the rating system is in by ordinance that it's done by
The clerk, treasurer,
and with
and legal
assistance,
counsel.
right, of legal counsel.
And I
right.
think that needs to be done in an open setting. I think everyone I've talked to, other municipalities, that is one area that they're getting sued left and right about. Even though they might be totally legit in what they're doing, it still opens up lawsuits, and those cost money. So I think it needs to be noted in there that we're doing anything, deciding anything with the licenses needed to be done in an open meeting for any type of bias or anything. I would also even say that, I mean, we've got the clerk and the treasurer, that no elected official should sit on that board.
That's why we specifically named those two, that they're elected officials, but they don't have a vote. So
I
that was.
respect they don't have a vote, but they also run for election. Right? And that requires some money. So that's two areas I feel strong on. I mean, I'm one person on the board, but yeah, I don't think the clerk or the treasurer should be on there because they're elected, and then I feel that anything to do with adding, scoring or anything with issuing licenses needs to be done at an open or public meeting.
Mark, do you recall, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the city of Warren, they encountered some lawsuits, some legal actions, and I know that when you and I talked about it, that's not why they got into trouble.
I don't know the specifics of that litigation, but it's my understanding that was not why they got into trouble with respect to the scoring. And in fact, I think, but again, I'm guessing, so I shouldn't do that, but so that you can have conversation.
Yeah.
I think part of the litigation was that there was not a numerical or objective scoring. One of the issues was how subjective it was alleged to be. But I don't know the outcome of that, and I don't know the specific challenges. But I don't think it was because of numerical scoring.
Right, so they didn't get in trouble because they didn't meet in a public meeting, it was their process.
I think it's completely different. I think that was, and that was noted in there, and anything that was issued was rescinded, and it had to be redone. And that's the same with other municipalities, I think like Berkeley, Warren, I believe it was Madison Heights I spoke with. Maybe, I can't remember, in a group conversation, but yeah, there's definitely something that's, we might be totally legit in what we're doing, but unless we're making it very transparent, we're opening ourselves up. And I don't think we need to do that.
So do you have a suggestion on what you would like to see in there?
As far as the clerk and treasurer, no, I don't know how we would rework that, but adding something where anything involving scoring or anything with the issuing of the licenses needs to happen in an open meeting.
Mr. Clark, is that pretty correct? Pretty accurate?
Well, I don't know that it's accurate. I'm not going to say it's accurate or inaccurate. You should put in your ordinance what the law permits. And if you want the scoring to be done publicly, then you can do that. That's not a question of accuracy or inaccuracy. It's just a matter of if you want the scoring to be done. One of the reasons, whether it's a good reason, a good policy reason or not, that ordinances like this include, with consultation with the attorney, is to allow for attorney-client privilege communications regarding what's being done. And that I have seen that in other similar ordinances. I'm not aware of issues related to that. I'm not saying there aren't any. I'm saying I do not know of any. But again, this is your ordinance that you adopt or do not adopt on behalf of your community. You should have it say whatever the law permits it to say in your idea of how it should be applied.
Also, I was wondering, remember we had the transposed numbers for the plants at one point, was that corrected? Because I don't see it in yellow, I'm wondering, maybe it was a different time, I just want to make sure.
The highlighted items or information are where I'm proposing changes. One of them that you pointed out was the transposition of the numbers. Another was in your original ordinance, and I apologize for this. The original ordinance that was presented, my typing and computer skills are limited, and I prepared those when my office was closed. I did not have a secretary, and I did that myself. I don't offer that as an excuse. I offer it as an explanation. And so there were a couple of definitions that were repeated. I think there were maybe 3 or 4 definitions that were repeated. So I took those out. Well, in fairness, my secretary took those out and cleaned it up in that respect. So the reason you see under the definitions, particular definitions highlighted, it's because in the original ordinance, those definitions were stated twice. So I'm letting you know where that cleanup occurred. And then the other
You mentioned the transposition of the numbers. That was and is addressed in this proposed ordinance. And the other significant change I'm recommending is under your original ordinance, the penalty for violating it was a misdemeanor. I believe it's appropriate to still have a penalty as a misdemeanor. I'm not recommending it. The reason I'm not recommending it is when both medical marijuana and recreational marijuana within certain bounds was decriminalized, you cannot be charged with a crime as long as you're adhering to state law. The question becomes, well, if you're issuing a license under authority which the state provides to local municipalities, if you're issuing a license and somebody violates the license, could that be a misdemeanor? And I think the answer to that is yes, which is why the original ordinance contained a penalty for violation of a misdemeanor. When I revisited this, and my belief about that and my opinion about that remains the same. So if you want the violation to be a misdemeanor, it can be. When I looked at this to clean up the discrepancies that have been discussed in prior meetings and again tonight, I looked at other municipalities' ordinances, completely unscientific. I did some in Macomb County, I did some outstate, I did some based on size, the size of the municipality. And all of them, again, completely anecdotal, not scientific, but all of the other ordinances that I reviewed all had the penalties be civil infractions. And so rather than have the misdemeanor penalty, which again, I believe you can maintain that, and have that litigated about whether the village actually has that authority, which I believe it does, looking at the other ordinances with all that in mind, my recommendation is that the penalty be changed to a civil infraction, a municipal civil infraction. But again, that's your choice. If you adopt this, it's your ordinance, and you should have it state what you want it to state.
When we went in through this process and we looked at, adopting an ordinance, it says in here that no elected official shall, have any sort of interest monetarily in any of the businesses. So I'd be interested in your feedback on the scoring. We went into it with the thought process that the clerk, treasurer, and legal counsel certainly doesn't have a vote. So I didn't certainly think that any of us would be involved in that scoring process, since we would be charged with the actual awarding of the license based on the independent recommendation of the score. So I would be interested in your thoughts on who you think should be doing that work.
That's a good question. I don't have anyone specific in mind, but, I mean, the clerk and the treasurer both receive a salary, and they run for election. There's nothing saying that this organization or these licensees can't provide to a campaign fund. So I feel that's, I don't know.
Well, there's certainly campaign finance laws that are in play there, and you're right, that is a possibility,
Yeah.
but
Most of the time, they don't exceed the $1,000.
right, well, but it could. I mean,
It
to
could.
Justin's point, it could. I don't have another solution, so we can, we can table this, and you could let me know what you want it to be.
But even a non-elected official could be bribed from that
Yeah.
standpoint.
Yeah, I mean,
Anybody could be bribed.
I can,
has her hand up.
having the open meetings, I think, is more important for where I'm standing or where I'm sitting, whatever you want to consider.
I would agree with that, actually.
Yeah, that
I don't-
needs to
I don't
happen
know
open,
it
very
matters whether it's-
transparent. That, everyone I've talked to in other municipalities, they say that's the most important thing, is transparency with this.
And I recall the treasurer saying she didn't even want to do that. She didn't want to be a part of this, specifically stated that
So
at
now,
a
so
separate meeting.
Right.
if we can have the treasurer, this treasurer, or any treasurer back out, then now we're narrowing down
To
to
just the
2
clerk,
people.
yeah.
So I don't know, is there an alternate, or is there, just 2 seems kind of narrow.
The ordinance puts in place for that as an option, right? I believe that you're correct, Treasurer Maddox has declined, and does not want to take on that task. Again, if you have a recommendation of who that other person should be, feel free to speak up and bring it forth. I don't know who that would or should be.
Yeah.
Could be your assistant, maybe. Just hire another person.
Right.
Who else do we have
And
hired
it doesn't.
in the office that isn't an
We
elected
have the
official?
chairs of the planning commission and the ZBA, you could use one of them.
Well, again, the planning commission adopted the zoning,
I'm just
so
saying the body.
I'm not comfortable with that,
Yeah.
But they're not elected officials.
right?
Yeah.
Anybody that has a vote on anything, I think should be excluded, which is why we looked to those bodies that are elected but do not have a vote.
Would it seem, I don't know, does it make sense to reach to another outside community? Or maybe an elected official in a different community that said, hey, could you come sit on this scoring board for us? And they're very
I'd rather just see it as a presidential appointment, maybe. Just leave it generalized as something like that.
I'm not going to pick and choose
'Cause, yeah,
who's going to be on that board, right? Whatever's in this ordinance, that's what's
Yeah,
gonna
that's what you
say,
wanna
because
stick to.
again, it's subjective. And
Creation
that's
of the
why I
ethics
wanted to
board?
make sure that my office was not involved in,
With the ethics board that I suggested, could this go before an ethics board, or is that?
I'm not gonna say that's a bad idea, just, then we'd have to pause this, form an ethics board, and then readdress this. And if that's something we wanna consider or look at doing, I think it's just more time.
It
I don't know
is.
if this is time sensitive, I don't see why it
well,
would
of
be.
course it is, because right,
Yeah.
everybody's here wanting an update on it.
Yeah.
We get phone calls all the time, and, I'm not in any
My
hurry.
main concern is
I'm
just
not
to
in any
protect
hurry
the
to do
village
this,
from
right?
legal action, lawsuits,
I
unneeded
understand.
expenses.
Yep, I'm
or
not
stuff that
arguing with your
can be
points. I'm just saying,
avoided by transparency.
Give me an option, right? Tell me what you think is reasonable, and let's debate it. I mean, I don't have any
Can we motion
problem.
to table this?
I
Can we
don't-
have discussion outside of a meeting to draft, change the draft, to bring it back to next month? Are we allowed to do that?
A quorum can't
Right.
do it.
Not a quorum, but
Right. No,
You have to be a
Why would we
subcommittee.
not just have discussion right now and tell me what you wanted to say? If you want
Yeah.
to see another draft.
well, I mean,
Or if you need
I
time
do
to
want to
think
see another
about it,
draft,
if you
but I
need-
do want, scoring to be done in an open meeting. So that needs to be added and brought back so we can see it as written before we vote on it. And then as far as who's on that board, that definitely needs to
Sorry,
be
can you-
addressed. If
Can
we've
you
got
point me
one
to that
person
page?
that's,
What page are you on, so
I
I
think
can make
it's-
sure I put it in the right spot?
these aren't numbered, but got 1,
Fines,
2, 3,
penalties.
4, 5, 6, 7 talks about overall scoring. And I don't know if that's the place to put it, or under the scoring, maybe Mark
Oh,
could.
overall scoring, yes, I was on the right page, okay.
That or at, somewhere on the next page where it talks about if they're in the event of a tie, I don't know where to place it, properly in the ordinance. But, we do talk about ties. I guess that was the other thing, I think Megan, you brought it up, and I thought maybe it would be in here, like a minimum score. If we get
Yeah,
one person that
because
gets
if we
1
get a
point,
bunch
one
of
person gets
3s
2
and
points, and
4s,
we're gonna
yeah.
award a
Well,
license to.
No, because the
That's
way
what's
that
your
it's worded
recommendation.
is that you do not have to award any licenses. We can go
Okay,
through this process, and the applicant understands that it's not a guarantee that a license will be granted.
But then who determines that then?
This board, by vote.
So then, once again, we're voting on who gets a license, right?
Right, but based on the point total that's brought to us. And you could say, we only have one, and they scored a 2, and that's not acceptable to Justin Parker, and I'm voting no. And Bob can say, they scored a 2, we had 1, I'm comfortable with that, he's voting yes. That's
Okay,
why we
all right.
vote on it. Right.
Thanks for
Just
the
because
Thank
we
you
go.
for that, yeah, that I was unaware of, but thank you for that, yeah. So, yeah, I just don't wanna, just get the guy that just
Something-
walked in the door and filled out half an application. Hey, here we go.
Correct, yep.
You know?
Just because he does, and it's scored, doesn't mean we have to award a license.
Okay.
Well, as this is constituted, it, with all due respect, it does, because it says, if
Okay.
you look at
Where?
the paragraph under overall scoring,
Thank you.
at the bottom, it says, "The village clerk shall forward all information, including scoring and ranking information, to the village president, who at the next Romeo Village Council meeting, unless postponed for good cause or otherwise, shall award licenses as follows," and then it has the numbers. And so again, that, which you don't have to have that. And there's also, if you don't have more than one license, if you look at the text that is after that, in the event the evaluation scoring, which causes there to be more than one applicant who achieves scores sufficiently to qualify. So, but the point, again, being to yours about transparency and objectivity is, if somebody submits the application and scores well, then there should be some expectation, at least the way it's constituted. It doesn't have to be that the village council isn't, because of influence or lobbying or people's perspective, say, well, yeah, this is an excellent candidate, but no. Because that could be
Problematic.
fertile ground for
That's selective.
a lawyer's grandchild's college fund. And so, but again, the ordinance, if you adopt it, is gonna reflect what you want to have take place in your community and how you want it to be applied and how you want it to be achieved. And so it should contain what you want it to contain within.
I think if you just put shall or shall not in there.
May.
Well,
May.
But
then-
at some point, this board's gotta vote.
right, but you have to have a standard. One
And
of the
somewhere
things,
at the end of the line, this board would
Right.
have to vote.
but
So-
there has to be a standard, and this is where I disagree with Justin about what happened in Warren, is that the thrust of that was there weren't any standards. There were no standards. It was kind of whoever spoke last, or and so I don't disagree that there should be a vote, and I don't disagree there should be the opportunity to reject or approve, but there has to be standards, because that's absent standards, and that's why the scoring system is suggested. It's intended to be as objective as possible. Points are awarded and based on the listing of those items, so that it's objective as possible. And then once that objectivity is followed, and then it comes to the board, again, you can say may or may accept or reject the recommendation of the clerk or whoever the scoring person is. But if you don't have standards, you potentially are gonna have problems.
So does it make sense then to put minimum scoring requirements, like so much per section and an overall of a minimum of this percentage?
You can do that.
Does that make sense? Does that help alleviate us awarding or having to vote on a license that could put us in a legal situation? I don't know if that makes
Well,
sense.
I don't know if it avoids it, but again, I apologize for repeating myself, but you want to have standards, and you want those standards to be as objective as possible, so that you're not accused of awarding licenses based on favoritism or anything that's untoward. And how you do that, again, within the bounds of the law, you're probably only limited by your imagination, but I just strongly encourage you to have standards and have them be as objective as possible, so that you avoid arguments about undue influence.
Right, because then you could potentially get into the situation of whoever's scoring these going, well, geez, I don't think we should have any licenses issued, so I'm
They're all
only gonna
zeros.
score them once, and then no one meets that standard. I mean, I understand your point.
I get it.
But that's the, you know,
Yeah, yep. Yep.
That's why
I think we're all
lawyers
looking
make a
for the
lot of
same
money,
outcome
right?
here. I'm not saying, no, I don't want this to happen. I just want to make sure that the village is protected as best it can be. And
Well-
if that means saying that, yes, you have to score at least so much in each category, because what if someone just maxes out 5 of them and gets the most points and doesn't touch any of the other ones, right? And they're number 2, right? Then they've just neglected to touch 4 or 5 of these areas that we're looking for, and a qualified candidate for a license, right? So,
I mean, the application is, you know, is pretty specific with the standards that they are required to submit in all the documents, and I must say that. So I really don't think that you're running a risk of having somebody who's not qualified to operate a business for which they're granted a license. And if they are, then there's penalties. If they turn out to not do what we've said that they must do by our ordinance and our zoning, then we have remedies in place to, you know, to fix that, to shut them down or to fine them, charge them with, you know, with some penalties.
I can respect that.
So I don't have an issue with adding the word, you know, at a public meeting.
The scoring.
If that's, you know, where your comfort level is that they do it in public. I really don't know how that would work as far as, you know, the scope of the amount of documents. I believe that it would be boxes of documents for every application based on the information that we are requesting. But perhaps they, you know, score one at however many applicants we get, one at one meeting and one the next, I don't know. But if that's your comfort level, we can make them do it at a public posted meeting. I don't
Could
have
they
an
do
issue
a
with that.
public disclosure of how the scoring was, or, you know?
Well,
once
that would all
they've
be open,
compiled
it's
it?
subject to the Open Meetings Act, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, that would be open for anybody who wanted to
So
request
they
that.
could do preliminary, and then they could go through the scoring process while they did the scoring.
We're not saying it has to be done at a council meeting at 7 on Mondays. I mean, it can be done, they can hold that
No, they would have to
meeting.
post a public
Yeah.
meeting of their own, pick a time that they
Yeah,
want to sit down
exactly.
with all the boxes and spread them out
Yeah.
and go through that,
It's
go through that
posted,
process.
it's out there. If people come, they come. If they don't, they don't. But we've given that opportunity for people to come and see what's happening.
So do you want us to take this back and include that wording, or are you good with Mark and I adding the wording that says that the scoring process will be done in a public meeting and voting on this tonight?
I'll leave that up to the vote of the board tonight. I'm not gonna make that determination on my own. I can't, right? I can't say that's what I want, so everyone else is gonna listen to what I want.
Well, that's why you have one vote.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So say what your objection is and what
Yeah.
you want to see, and then, you know,
Yeah.
somebody's
I
going
mean,
to make a
I'd like to see
motion
it
and somebody's going to
I'd
vote.
like to see it written and see how it, if it makes sense. Yeah, I would like to see it personally, but I'm not saying that.
So you then make a motion to table it, or somebody else make a motion to say include it and let's vote on it.
I'll make a motion to include it, and we vote on this tonight.
To include that the scoring process will be done at a public meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
And do we need to add anything in there about being able to not award a license? Because I think,
You do if you.
I'd
if
like
you
to see a
want that-
minimum.
If you want that
A
ability.
minimum expectation of numbers put in there.
yeah, because I
So
mean,
if
you did
we,
say
if it's a
regardless,
total of
we're
100,
issuing them
I'd like to
based on
see
awardable
at
points.
least 75 to 80%.
I would
Okay.
agree.
Then I don't know if you want your motion to stand or if you want to withdraw your motion, because now we've complicated it by adding other things that I certainly think should be, you know, reviewed by Mark and I and brought
withdraw
back
it.
for another agenda.
I'm gonna withdraw
I mean,
it
another
at this
motion.
I make a motion to table the adoptance of the marijuana ordinance.
The
till next-
restated one,
The
yep.
restated marijuana ordinance until next month after it's reviewed.
So we want to, or just want to be
What
clear.
changes we wanna make?
Your public meeting, minimum scoring, and did you have a number in mind?
I'm thinking 75, 80. Let's go with 80.
80%?
I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know. Well, because I'm thinking 75, that's a C, you got most of it in there.
Well, and give us the option of, if it is a lower score, that we can accept or reject it.
Well, I guess if we're putting a minimum in, we're not gonna.
So
go
is
say we're
that,
gonna
is that the
lower our
wording
minimum.
then, that we have the option to reject any applicant if
Below a score.
below a certain score, or if,
I'll second this motion.
I don't know
I
where
think
you
we should put all that down and give it to our president.
well,
What we're trying
Well,
to define is
yeah,
what
she's
we're gonna
defining
change
the
for
minimum,
next
yeah.
month.
You
So
think
next month
70,
we have
75% minimum?
Minimum, 75.
And
out of 100, it's 100.
so 70 points out of 100. And do we want to say anything in there about scoring in each category at a minimum?
I don't know, because I mean, I would hate for them to get all those points and then miss the last one where it's the public,
Outreach?
yeah. So I almost think, I don't know. I mean.
Minimum of 50 in each category, minimum of 70 overall, minimum of 50%.
But what does 50 in each category come up
50%.
to?
So that's a minimum of 50% in each category. It's just, what is it, 10 points per category?
Not, no, some of them are 5, some of them are 10.
Yeah, so a minimum of 50%. With an overall minimum of 70, 75?
Can you get a half point in the 5 category?
I'd go 70, but I think we're still pulling numbers out of the sky, but I'd feel okay at 70.
Just a set 70?
An overall
I don't know
score.
where I'm getting that from, but you guys
Because you at
want a
least
number.
passed in school with a 70.
Yeah.
Your mom was happy.
I mean, I just brought back up something Megan had brought up a couple meetings ago, I think, about a minimum. I didn't know if that was something we wanted to address at this time.
Okay, so 70 points minimum,
60.
and we'll look to.
Half in
we
each
can
category.
make some
Half in
calls.
each category is more than 70.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Half, 50% in each category, just really quick, off my top of my head, is more than 70. So we can't even say 50% in each.
I see, yeah, the math doesn't make sense. With at least 1 point? Yeah, I don't know. I just
I
hate
don't know,
for
somebody else
something
said
to
that.
get missed.
Can we say with at least something from each category?
At least 1 point in each category?
And that way, it's at least
Does that make any sense, Mark?
duly met,
Okay.
Yeah.
so that they can't just completely skip that. I feel like that one will just be an easy one to skip.
Exactly.
Not doing public outreach, informing.
So a minimum of score of at least 1 point per category.
With an overall minimum of
70?
70. I mean, does that make sense to the rest of the board? Or is it, are we just fishing, or are we making no sense? I don't want to feel like we're the only two giving input. I know Maggie gave a little bit.
Would that even get them to 70? 1 point in each?
Well, that's just basically saying they've got to at least do something in each
And
category.
at least address it.
They have to at least address it, and if they
No,
max
1
out
point.
5 other categories and they get their 70 points,
1 point
so
needs to
be
get
it.
9.
They've told us that they're going to do something in each category.
Yeah, because we can't give half points, because some of them are 5.
Zach? You feel good?
Okay.
I think Megan's calculating something, adding something up.
Half, my, off the top of my head was wrong, half is at about 50.
So a half if they scored
But that
half
was
the
it.
maximum of points per,
But that was doing the 2.5 in the 5 category though, too.
So I feel comfortable with, as long as they've scored at least 1 point in each category.
I think that's an easier way to put it.
Yeah.
instead of an
ensure-
overall minimum.
Well.
You still want a
no.
minimum.
Included, yeah,
At least,
together.
at least one in each category with an overall minimum of 70.
Okay.
And then with the additional wording for
Public meetings.
public meetings.
Okay. Was there anything else that we talked about that I missed or that you wanted to see?
My name on a building, I don't know, but, no. Oh, wait,
Something
it's already
that,
there. Never mind.
Right.
something that I would like, but not necessarily within this ordinance, needs to be added. But on the second to last page, the publication, it's allowed to be in a general circulating paper. I would just prefer that to be our actual local paper, the Record. That's just a comment.
Again, you pigeonhole yourself into if the next time we do this and the ordinance is still in place and that entity isn't around, then we can't meet the standard of the ordinance.
That's just my comment, my
Yep,
suggestion.
okay. All right, so, I'm sorry, you made the motion to table. Who supported that?
Fowler.
Fowler. Any other discussion?
I just want to make sure that it is noted in the amendment that the treasurer has recused her authority to,
I mean, it can't be noted in the ordinance.
Right.
or whatever documentation is.
Yeah, I guess before we vote, is that something else we need to address?
I believe we wrote it that she could, let me find that paragraph, right?
And
Because
then do
we
we
knew
have to
that.
have an alternative?
Says the village clerk and/or village treasurer with the assistance of the legal
So,
advice
and/or,
from the
so she
village
doesn't
attorney.
have to.
So, yeah, I didn't even think about that. So we're comfortable with just the two, basically Catherine.
Well, I
or the
wanted,
clerk,
I
and it's
wanted
not say
two,
Catherine, just
but.
the
Yeah,
clerk.
keep
Right.
in mind, the reference to titles is to the office,
Yeah,
not
that's
the
why I
person.
pulled that, Catherine. So we're comfortable with just the clerk basically awarding points with guidance from legal.
Well, ideally, we wanted two people, the clerk and the
Yeah.
treasurer, whoever those people
Yeah, I
are,
can
to
respect
do
that.
it.
So do we have
So,
to
If you have
look at
another,
an alternate? Can,
if you have an idea of who that should be,
not, at this time I don't. And
Right.
I don't know if anyone
That's-
does, so, you know.
right, that's the
Put
problem.
anyone on the
right.
spot to answer that question right now, any of us, I don't know. So maybe that's something we need to consider.
I mean, we can probably look to put in there the clerk and/or treasurer or alternate assigned by village council, if that's the way you want to word it, so that gives us the opportunity
I like
to,
that.
I like that too.
to
Yeah.
do okay.
Flexibility.
Yeah. I need to redo my
So
motion.
you might want to say appoint up to two, because you might have to replace both.
Yeah, the clerk might back out then also.
So we would appoint two people to work with council. if
Okay.
They didn't.
Work with legal for scoring.
Or two alternates is what you're saying,
Right.
two
Up to
alternates.
two alternates.
Okay, approved by council. Two alternates approved by council? By majority vote of council, probably, to make Mark happy, right? Okay, so we've got the public meeting, we've got the minimum scoring, and then we've addressed who's going to do it to some lengths.
And my motion stands.
To table it until you see this?
Yes.
Okay, and we'll bring it back in your support stance. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that concludes our new business. We have one agenda item left, which is closed session. So at this time, we're going to stop the live feed. The closed session would be for the purposes of ongoing union employee negotiations. So can I get a motion to enter into
Second?
closed session?
Are you making the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Make-
Second?
Yes, okay, we have a motion and support. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Good. Okay, so we're back from closed session. It is 9:56.